Snow-covered wilderness, death waiting in every direction, and a man being hunted not just by killers, but by the terrifying past he can never escape. Today's survival story will leave you thinking about one thing until the very end. Sometimes people fear their sins more than death itself. So welcome back to HOPKART Peru, where every story becomes a fight to survive until the very last breath. The story begins with a freezing stretch of the Rocky Mountains, buried under snow and brutal winds. A man named Gideon has just hunted a rat, and now he's crouched beside a fire, trying to cook it so he can finally eat something. But then, out of nowhere, a gunshot tears through the silence and slams straight into him. The second the bullet hits, Gideon realizes he's not alone out here. The icy wind suddenly feels heavier, more dangerous, and panic starts building fast inside him. The fear in his eyes is immediate. He doesn't stop to think, he just runs as fast as he can. A few moments later, 5 men arrive at the campsite. One of them is Colonel Carver, a former Civil War soldier. The other 4 are bounty hunters, men who only care about the reward money hanging over Gideon's head. They've come out here for one reason only, to kill him and collect the payout. Carver's face says everything. He's obsessed with finishing the hunt, and the others follow right behind him through the snow. Meanwhile, Gideon keeps pushing forward, terrified and exhausted, knowing that if they catch him alive, he's dead anyway. And in the middle of his escape, he suddenly crashes into an ice-cold river. The freezing water hits like a shockwave. His breathing turns ragged instantly, and now survival is the only thing left on his mind. The river is brutally cold, and by the time Gideon drags himself back onto the shore, he's barely holding on. His whole body is shaking uncontrollably. Not far away, Carver and the others start slowing down, clearly hesitant to keep moving through the deadly cold. One of the bounty hunters tells Carver they already shot Gideon, and after falling into that freezing river, there's no way he could still be alive. They demand their money so they can turn around and leave. The cold is breaking everyone's spirit except Carver's. Carver snaps back at them in anger. What kind of bounty hunters are you? Nobody means no payment. His voice cuts through the wind. If he's dead, find the body, then you'll get paid. Meanwhile, Gideon somehow manages to start a fire. He strips off his soaked clothes, desperate to get some heat back into his body before the cold kills him first. That's when he notices the bullet lodged in his left arm. It has to come out. The pain is unbearable, but he knows he doesn't have a choice. Infection out here would be a death sentence. Gideon pulls out his knife and forces himself to dig the bullet out, gritting through every second of agony. A little while later, he realizes the men hunting him are probably already close. Resting isn't an option anymore. He quickly throws his clothes back on and starts moving again. But Gideon is smart. Every step he takes is calculated. Every move is about staying one step ahead of death. As Gideon moves through the snow, he carefully wipes away his footprints so nobody can track him. Not long after, Carver and the rest of the team reach the abandoned fire. The flames are still burning, and the second Carver sees them, he knows Gideon is still alive. Now he's certain the hunt is close. As they move deeper into the snow, Carver notices footprints splitting into 2 different directions. He immediately realizes what Gideon is doing. He's trying to throw us off, he tells the others. Spread out and find him. One of the bounty hunters pushes ahead through the trees. A few drops of blood catch his attention in the snow. He slowly looks up, and that's when Gideon strikes. Hidden up in a tree, Gideon suddenly hurls a weapon straight down at him. It slams directly into the man's head before he even has time to react. Gideon waited for the perfect moment, and the attack is fast, brutal, and precise. He quickly climbs down from the tree and checks the man. Seeing that he's still breathing, Gideon finishes him off without hesitation. Then he grabs all of the man's weapons and disappears back into the wilderness. A moment later, Carver hears the distant sound of his man collapsing. He rushes over with the others, and the situation instantly turns even more dangerous. Now this isn't just a hunt anymore, it's survival. The second Carver sees his man lying dead in the snow, he warns everyone to stay sharp. He tells them Gideon is extremely dangerous now, and nobody lowers their guard. Then he makes one thing very clear. If they find Gideon, they're only supposed to wound him. Carver wants to kill him personally. The group starts moving again through the freezing wilderness. Meanwhile, Gideon keeps pushing forward until he finally reaches an isolated cabin with a horse tied up outside. The cold is brutal, and after being hunted non-stop, he's completely exhausted, but he still refuses to stop. As soon as Gideon starts untying the horse, a young woman named Charlotte suddenly steps out and points a rifle straight at him. She warns him he's not stealing anything from here. Gideon immediately freezes in place, but then Charlotte notices how badly injured he is. He's shaking from the cold, barely able to stay standing. The sight of him changes her expression instantly. Instead of pulling the trigger, she calls for her brothers, and together they bring Gideon inside so they can treat his wounds. While they're cleaning the injury, Charlotte's father Abraham walks in. It doesn't take long for the family to realize this man is running from something serious. During the conversation, Gideon tells them he has money. He says he'll pay double whatever the horse is worth if they just sell it to him. Abraham finally agrees. He tells Gideon he can stay there for the night and leave in the morning because his condition is too bad to travel right now. Even knowing danger could follow him to their doorstep, the family still chooses to help him. Gideon agrees because it's exactly what he needs. Meanwhile, somewhere else in in the mountains, Carver and his men keep searching through the snow. They look everywhere, but Gideon is nowhere to be found. Even then, nobody wants to give up the hunt. The look on Carver's face says it all. He has no intention of letting his target escape. That night, Gideon lies awake inside the cabin, breaking down as memories from his past come flooding back. Whatever he did before, it still haunts him. The guilt never left. The next morning, Carver and the others finally arrive at the cabin, but Gideon is already gone. When Carver asks where the man went, Charlotte lies to him and says Gideon stole a horse and left before sunrise. Carver immediately loses his temper. He tells her not to lie to him and demands to know which direction Gideon went. Charlotte is terrified, but she still refuses to give him up. Carver threatens her. He says if she doesn't tell the truth, he'll kill her brother and hand her over to one of his most dangerous men. Even after hearing that, Charlotte says nothing. In the end, Carver walks away. Deep down, he doesn't want innocent people getting hurt. The tension inside the cabin is suffocating, but Charlotte never breaks. She stays silent the entire time. Meanwhile, Gideon has already traveled deep into the mountains on horseback. When he finally stops, he discovers food hidden in the saddlebag. Charlotte secretly packed it for him before he left. As he eats, one question keeps running through his mind. Who are these men really, and why are they so obsessed with hunting him down? That's when Gideon decides he needs answers before anything else. So instead of hiding, he deliberately starts a fire. The smoke rises high into the sky, exactly the way he wants it to. Gideon is no longer just running. Now he's trying to uncover the truth about the people chasing him. Far away, Carver spots the smoke immediately and realizes Gideon is close. And that's exactly what Gideon was counting on. A little later, Carver and his entire group arrive near the fire. Hidden back in the darkness, Gideon watches every move they make without being seen. Before long, night takes over the mountains, and Carver's men settle near the fire. Then suddenly, Carver appears behind Gideon and presses a gun on him. Gideon only asks one question: who are you, and why are you trying to kill me? The two men stand face to face in the freezing darkness, surrounded by complete silence. The atmosphere feels heavier than ever. Then Carver says two words: Seraphim Falls. The second Gideon hears that name, the shock hits him instantly. His expression changes. He finally understands. You're Colonel Carver, he says quietly. Carver stares at him for a moment and nods. Yeah, he says. Now you remember. And just like that, Gideon realizes his past has finally caught up with him. But before Carver can react, Gideon suddenly slips away into the darkness and disappears. Carver heads back to his men and warns them that Gideon is still close and could attack again at any moment. Meanwhile, Gideon keeps moving through the wilderness when he suddenly comes across a dead bear caught in a trap. The animal has already frozen to death. By now, Gideon is thinking through every single move carefully because he knows one small mistake could get him killed. He quickly removes the trap and hides beneath the snow farther ahead on the trail. A little while later, as Carver's group passes through the area, one of the bounty hunters steps directly into it. The bear trap snaps violently into his chest, tearing into him instantly. His screams echo through the mountains as he writhes in agony. The second Carver sees the injury, he knows the man isn't surviving this, and the death waiting for him is going to be brutal. Watching his own man suffer like that, Carver slowly pulls out his revolver and shoots him himself, ending the pain. The sight shakes everyone. Fear spreads across the faces of the remaining men almost immediately. Two of them completely lose their nerve. One of them snaps at Carver, saying he never told them Gideon was this dangerous. They refuse to keep going any farther. But Carver doesn't even flinch. If you want to leave, he tells them, then leave. Even now, Carver keeps moving forward without fear while the others slowly start falling apart mentally. But before the two men can leave, Carver stops them. He tells them both horses belong to him, so if they want out, they'll have to keep walking through the mountains on foot. Then he explains that the men who died only got themselves killed because they stopped paying attention. Out here, he says, you stay alert every second, or you die. After that, Carver gives them another reason to stay. Since two men are already dead, their share of the reward money will now be split evenly between the three survivors. The greed hits instantly. Carver reminds them that if Gideon reaches the city, they'll never catch him again. If they want the money, they have to kill him out here in the wilderness. The second they hear that, both men decide to keep going. Meanwhile, Gideon has already reached the upper side of the mountain range and is heading toward town when he spots three unfamiliar riders nearby. After overhearing their conversation, he quickly realizes they're criminals hiding from the law. Gideon wants no trouble with them, so he quietly tries slipping away unnoticed. But one of the younger men recognizes him. The atmosphere changes immediately. The young man tells the others that this is Gideon, a Civil War soldier who once killed more than 100 men in a single day. He says Gideon lost his children, and after that, something inside him changed completely. The second they hear that story, the others visibly tense up. But the young man says there's no way they can let Gideon walk away alive now. Just hearing Gideon's name is enough to put fear into every man standing there. The young man says if Gideon escapes, he could turn them into the authorities. So he pulls out his gun and starts walking after him, promising that today will be his last day alive. But then, Gideon spins around with shocking speed and drives his knife straight into the young man's throat in one clean motion. The attack happens so fast, the kid never even gets a chance to react. Gideon coldly tells them that young men never learn from their mistakes and usually end up getting themselves killed because of it. After that, he takes one of their horses and rides off. Sometime later, Carver and the others arrive arrive at the scene and notice tracks from 3 horses in the snow. 2 of them headed one way, while the 3rd horse broke off in another direction. When they follow the trail, they eventually find the young man's body lying in the snow. One of Carver's men recognizes him immediately and says the dead outlaw actually has a bigger bounty on his head than Gideon does. The second he realizes that, greed takes over. He tells Carver he's taking the body back to town because the reward money will make him rich. He says he's done chasing Gideon. But the moment he loads the corpse onto the horse, Carver suddenly shoots the animal dead. The horse crashes hard into the snow. Carver calmly looks at him and says, "That was my horse. If you want the body so bad, carry it yourself." The man instantly realizes there's no possible way he can haul a corpse all the way back to town on foot. Meanwhile, Gideon reaches a railroad construction camp nearby. At this point, Carver refuses to let anyone back out of the hunt and keeps pushing constant pressure on the last man still with him. By now, Gideon is starving. He finally stops his horse near the railroad camp and heads inside to get something to eat. But a few workers notice the horse immediately and realize it was stolen. They quickly grab Gideon, tie him up with ropes, and force him to sit inside the camp. Sometime later, Carver and his last remaining partner arrive there and hear that a thief has been captured. After constantly running for so long, Gideon is completely drained, weak, and barely hanging on physically. But before Carver can get a good look at him, Gideon secretly cuts through the ropes with his knife. Then he grabs another horse and bolts out of the camp. The second Carver realizes what happened, he and his last man immediately take off after him again. Meanwhile, Gideon rides as fast as he can through the mountains, while Carver keeps closing the distance behind him. But after hours of non-stop exhaustion, Gideon's horse finally collapses to the ground. The animal is completely spent. Seeing the horse suffering like that clearly hits Gideon hard. The horse struggles to breathe, writhing in pain as it takes its final breaths. Gideon can't bear to watch it suffer any longer, so he raises his gun and puts the animal down himself. A little later, Carver and his partner arrive at the dead horse. The second Carver sees it, he realizes Gideon can't be far away anymore. Now he knows he's getting closer than ever. As Carver's last partner slowly walks toward the dead horse to check it, something suddenly moves inside the animal's body. It's Gideon. He had actually sliced the horse open and hidden himself inside it to survive. The second the man gets close enough, Gideon bursts out and presses a knife against his throat, ordering Carver to throw down his weapons. It's such a brutal and desperate survival move that nobody could have expected it. Carver tosses down his guns, but then, with a quick motion, he secretly pulls out a small hidden pistol and shoots his own partner dead without hesitation. At this point, he doesn't need anyone anymore. He wants the entire reward for himself. Now only Gideon and Carver remain. Carver points his gun directly at Gideon and orders him onto his knees. Deep down, he wants Gideon to beg for his life. He wants to see fear in his eyes before killing him. But Gideon stays silent. The hatred inside Carver has consumed him so completely that he no longer even cares about his own people anymore. Gideon finally says, "If you're gonna do it, then put the bullet in my head." But Carver shakes his head. "I'm not giving you an easy death." That's when Gideon quietly tells him the truth. He says what happened back then was never his choice. He was following orders. And suddenly, the story shifts into the past. For the first time, Gideon finally starts revealing the truth about the memories that have been destroying him from the inside for years. The flashback takes us to Carver working on his farm with his son. Then suddenly, a group of soldiers arrives at the property, led by Gideon. The second Carver sees them, he and his son immediately run. Gideon enters the farmhouse and questions Carver's wife, demanding to know where Carver is because they need to search the entire property. As the soldiers move through the house, one of them spots a small child hiding inside, but instead of reporting it, he keeps it to himself. That mistake changes everything. Gideon keeps questioning Carver's wife, but she refuses to say anything. Eventually, the soldiers lose patience and set the house on fire. Right then, Carver arrives back at the farm, but Gideon's men overpower him and hold him down. Gideon accuses him of theft and demands to know where the weapons are hidden. Then suddenly, Carver's wife notices the fire spreading through the house. She screams that her son is still inside and runs straight into the flames. Moments later, her second son rushes in after her. Within seconds, the entire house is consumed by fire. Carver's wife and both children burn alive inside, while he helplessly watches everything collapse in front of him. The sight completely destroys him, and when Gideon realizes there were children inside the house the entire time, the shock hits him hard. He immediately grabs the soldier responsible for starting the fire and violently confronts him. The deaths of those innocent children shake Gideon to his core. For the first time, he truly begins regretting what he's become. The soldier coldly says they were traitors and didn't deserve to live anyway. Hearing that and seeing those innocent children die completely breaks Gideon inside. Right there on the spot, he throws down his gun and badge and walks away from the army for good. Then the story cuts back to the present. The fight between Gideon and Carver finally explodes into a brutal hand-to-hand battle. After a long struggle, Gideon eventually gains the upper hand and manages to take Carver's weapon away. But this fight isn't just about survival anymore. It's about grief, guilt, revenge, revenge, and years of pain that neither man has ever escaped. Even after winning, Gideon refuses to kill him. Instead, he tells Carver the nearest town is close by and says he should go live whatever life he has left. Then Gideon warns him one last time, if you come after me again, you die. After saying that, he walks away. But Carver has already lost everything. His entire life now revolves around one thing only, killing Gideon. So he goes after him again. A little later, Gideon reaches a barren stretch of rocky desert where a woman is traveling with a wagon. Gideon trades her the horse in exchange for a single bullet for his revolver. At this point, he already understands how this story ends. Only one final confrontation is left. Not long after, Gideon turns and sees Carver standing behind him with a gun in his hand. The two men slowly raise their weapons at each other and fire. The gunshots echo across the empty desert and Carver collapses to the ground, badly wounded. Gideon slowly walks toward him with the gun still in his hand. Looking up at him, Carver quietly says, "Just kill me too. End this once and for all." Gideon's face fills with sadness. He tells Carver he truly never knew there were children inside the house that day. He says he never came there to kill anyone. Then Gideon admits something even heavier. Ever since Carver's family died, he hasn't had a single peaceful night of sleep. Every word coming out of him feels painfully real, like years of guilt have been eating him alive from the inside. Then, slowly, Gideon places the gun into Carver's hand and tells him to finish it himself so the story can finally end. But Carver can't do it. The hatred that kept him alive for all these years is finally gone, and now there's nothing left inside either of them except exhaustion and pain. Gideon sees how broken Carver is, so he gives him the last of his water. Then the two men slowly stand back up. At this point, revenge has already destroyed both of their lives. Physically and mentally, they're completely shattered. Neither of them has any purpose left anymore. Gideon finally throws his knife down into the dirt, and without saying another word, both men walk away in opposite directions across the barren desert. How much longer either of them survives out there, nobody knows. And with that, the story comes to an end. After everything they lost, both men are left with nothing except loneliness and the weight of a broken past they can never escape. One mistake and an entire life falls apart. This story proves that pain never truly lets go of a person. No matter how far you run, some scars stay with you forever. For more heartbreaking stories like this, subscribe to channel HOPKART PARU, because here you don't just watch the story, you feel it.